The rain fell in thin, silvery sheets, soaking the cracked pavement of a quiet street. In a wealthy Lagos suburb, the world seemed muffled, hushed by the downpour, except for the occasional swish of car tires and the low hum of thunder rumbling in the distance. Outside a high-end bakery with golden lighting spilling onto the slick sidewalk, a small figure stood trembling, barefoot, drenched and shivering. Lila, no older than 7, clutched her tiny hands together, her belly gnawing with hunger, her large brown eyes wide with fear and longing. Her threadbare dress clung to her frame, no match for the cold, the rain, or the eyes of the world that refused to see her. A sleek black SUV pulled up, its engine a soft growl against the rain. The rear door swung open, and out stepped Eleanor Roberts, elegant, composed, and dry beneath a large designer umbrella held aloft by her chauffeur. In her early 60s, Eleanor wore power-like perfume, tailored navy coat, pearls, and a face carved in careful detachment. She moved with the stiff grace of someone used to being obeyed, respected, and unbothered. Lila took a hesitant step forward, water squishing under her tiny feet, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Please, Ma, I'm very hungry. Can I have some bread?" Eleanor stopped mid-step, the words slicing through the air. Her eyes dropped, and for a moment she simply stared, not at the child, but through her, as if trying to decide if she was real. Then, with a flicker of something sharp across her face, she recoiled, her mouth tight with disdain. "Back off!" she snapped, the disgust in her voice sharper than the wind. She reached into her purse and flung a few naira notes toward the wet ground, not waiting to see where they landed. Without another word, she climbed back into the SUV, slammed the door, and signaled the driver to move. The vehicle rolled forward with smooth indifference. Eleanor adjusted her scarf, eyes flicking to the side mirror. That's when it happened. Her gaze caught Lila's, just as the child bent to pick up the wet, muddy bills. For a fraction of a second, time stretched. Something in the girl's eyes, a look, a shape, a flicker of something long buried, pulled at Eleanor's chest like a ghost tugging on memory. Her breath caught. Then, just as quickly, she looked away, brushed the feeling off like rain on her shoulder. She didn't turn back, didn't ask a name, didn't care to know. But the chill that crept into her bones had nothing to do with the weather. The rain had passed, but the air still clung to the scent of damp earth and struggle. In a crumbling shack tucked behind a row of abandoned containers near the edge of a forgotten Lagos district, Lila sat cross-legged on a thin mattress, humming softly as she traced patterns into the peeling vinyl floor. The room was small, just enough space for a bed, a rusted stove, and a shelf of tattered books. Her mother, Monica, lay curled under a faded blanket, her face pale, the sharp bones of her collar visible through her cotton blouse. She coughed into a handkerchief, trying to muffle the sound, but Lila looked up, eyes dark with worry. Monica forced a smile, her strength flickering like the weak bulb dangling from the ceiling. She had always carried herself with quiet dignity, even when life ground her down to ash. At just 28, her body had begun to betray her. Fatigue, night fevers, pain in her chest, but she refused to seek medical help, not because she lacked the will, but because she feared what might follow. Hospitals required names, identities, records, doors she had locked and sealed nearly a decade ago. Years ago, Monica had lived another life. Clean bed sheets, morning house staff, private school brochures stacked on polished mahogany tables. Her family name opened doors, but all of that ended the day she fell for Victor Roberts, a boy born into wealth like her, but burdened by a reckless hunger for rebellion. He had been beautiful and broken, a tangle of privilege and addiction. Monica, young and naive, thought her love could save him. At 17, pregnant and terrified, she had told her parents the truth. What followed was swift and brutal. Disownment, disgrace, silence. And Eleanor Roberts, Victor's mother, made her position clear. Monica was nothing but a greedy little housemaid who'd clawed her way into Victor's bed. That she had once been hired to clean their guest house only fueled the humiliation. Eleanor threatened, bribed, and ultimately erased her from their world. She forbade Victor from seeing Monica again. When he spiraled further and eventually died of an overdose, Eleanor blamed only one person. Now, all these years later, Monica survived on scraps, cleaning offices at night, washing clothes by hand for neighbours during the day, all while hiding her secret from her daughter. Lila had never asked about her father, or about the grandparents she'd never met. Monica always deflected, changed the subject, kissed her on the forehead and whispered, "It's just us, baby. That's enough." But the truth pressed against her chest, heavier than her illness. Each time she looked at Lila, with those eyes so much like Victor's, she wondered how long she could keep the past buried. Across the city, Eleanor Roberts sat in her glass-walled office atop one of Victoria Island's most successful corporate towers. Her world gleamed, marble floors, fresh orchids, personal assistants who never looked her in the eye for too long. She had built an empire from real estate and oil, burnishing her image with charity galas, scholarships, and press photos of her shaking hands with governors. To Lagos society, she was a formidable matriarch, elegant, brilliant, and cold as steel. The portrait of her late son hung behind her desk. Victor at 15, smiling, handsome, untouched by the storm that would later consume him. The man he became, wild-eyed, erratic, lost in drugs, lived only in Eleanor's nightmares. She never spoke of him in public, never acknowledged the child he left behind. To her, that baby was a scar, the product of a trap set by a girl who betrayed the Roberts name. She had paid Monica to disappear, had promised herself that chapter was over, yet something had shifted since yesterday. That child, the barefoot girl on the street, had cracked something she didn't know was still fragile. The girl's eyes had stirred a storm Eleanor thought long dead. She hadn't slept well. Dreams came in flashes, Victor laughing, a child crying, a memory she couldn't place. She sat rigid in her chair, nursing a glass of whiskey she told no one about, telling herself it was nothing, just a coincidence, just a poor, hungry girl on the street. But deep beneath the layers of control and denial, something restless stirred. What if that girl wasn't just a beggar? What if the past, that messy, humiliating past, hadn't stayed buried? And on the other side of town, Monica coughed again, harder this time, her lips tinged with red. Lila rushed to her side, her small hands trembling. Monica stroked her daughter's cheek and forced a brave smile. But in her heart, she knew. Time was running out. The secret could no longer remain a secret. And Lila, innocent and unknowing, stood on the edge of a truth that would upend all three of their lives. The morning came with an eerie stillness, the kind that settles just before a storm breaks again. Lila returned from the neighborhood borehole with a jerry can half her size, her small arms trembling with the effort. She pushed open the creaky wooden door of their shack, expecting to hear her mother's weak but familiar voice calling her "my sunshine." Instead, she found silence, a thick, frightening silence. Monica lay crumpled on the floor, one arm twisted awkwardly beneath her, her lips pale, her chest rising in shallow, erratic breaths. The jerry can hit the ground with a loud thud, water splashing everywhere as Lila screamed. Her cries pierced the compound like sirens, and within moments, neighbors rushed in. A mechanic from 2 houses down lifted Monica gently, while another woman wrapped her in a wrapper and barked orders to get a kiki. They raced through the uneven roads, the wind slicing through Lila's soaked clothes as she held her mother's hand, her own face soaked in terrified tears. At the crowded free clinic on the outskirts of the city, a tired doctor in stained scrubs examined Monica under flickering lights. After what felt like forever, he pulled Lila aside, crouching to meet her eye. "She needs surgery, urgent one," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "It's her lungs. It's been building up for a long time. She could die without help." He handed her a slip of paper, a number Lila couldn't understand, and told her they didn't have the facilities. The surgery would have to happen in a private hospital, and it would cost far more than they had. Lila stared at the paper, the numbers swimming, meaningless, heavy. She didn't know where to go, whom to ask, but she knew one thing. She could not let her mother die. By midday, she was back on the streets, moving through neighborhoods she'd only stared at from afar, her bare feet blistered against polished tiles and cobbled walkways. She remembered the woman, the one in the black car, the one with the eyes that looked both soft and sad, even if her words had been sharp. Maybe she was having a bad day, Lila thought. Maybe she'll help now. She wandered aimlessly until she spotted a large office building, tall glass, security guards, expensive cars. Something told her this was the place. She squeezed through a gap in the gate when one of the security men turned to take a phone call. Inside, she stared at the dizzying height of the place. the cool floors and echoing heels. Before she could find her way, someone shouted. 2 guards grabbed her by the arms, lifting her clean off the floor as she thrashed. "What's going on?" A clipped voice echoed from the hallway. Eleanor Roberts stepped out of the elevator, her heels pausing just inches from Lila's dangling feet. The moment their eyes met again, something flickered behind Eleanor's controlled expression. Recognition, discomfort, maybe something more. "It's her again," she said tightly. "The street girl. Throw her out." But before the guards could move, Lila cried out, "Please, Auntie, help me. My mummy's name is Monica. She's very sick. Please don't let her die." The words hit the air like a gunshot. Eleanor's expression faltered. A full pause. She blinked, her mouth slightly open, then quickly closed again. That name, Monica, a name she had not allowed herself to hear, let alone speak, in nearly 8 years. She hadn't heard it since the night she wrote the check to make the girl disappear, since the funeral, since Victor's face turned grey in her memories. She stood frozen for a beat too long. Behind her, her assistant, a quiet, watchful woman named Amaka, stepped forward, brow furrowed. She had been with Eleanor for years and had never once seen her hesitate. "Madam, did she say Monica?" she asked gently. Eleanor snapped her gaze away from the child, clearing her throat. "I heard what she said," she muttered. Then more forcefully, "Get her out of here." But even as the girl was dragged away, kicking and crying, Eleanor didn't move. She stared at the place where Lila had stood, her hands trembling ever so slightly by her sides. The name echoed in her ears, louder than the child's cries. Monica, sick, help me. For the first time in years, Eleanor Roberts wasn't sure if she had buried the past, or if the past had just found its way to her doorstep. Eleanor couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, the fortress she'd built around herself, of boardrooms, fundraisers, and carefully controlled silence, had begun to crack. The name Monica echoed in her mind, like a prayer she didn't know how to undo. She made no calls, spoke to no one about it, but the next morning, she gave her driver a quiet instruction. "Follow the girl, discreetly." The man didn't ask questions. He never did. By nightfall, Eleanor had the answer she wasn't prepared for. The child lived in a slum on the city's fringe, in a shack barely held together with rusted sheets and nails. But more than that, Monica was still alive. From the back seat of her SUV, Eleanor watched from across the street as nurses wheeled a frail, sunken version of the girl she once despised into a clinic. Monica's skin had dulled, her frame ghost-like, but the sharpness in her eyes, the fire, had not faded. Then Eleanor saw the child run out to the Kiki driver, calling him Uncle, with the same wide, hopeful smile she had once seen on Victor's face. It winded her. There was no denying it now. The girl was her blood. That smile, those cheekbones, the way she tilted her head when she asked a question. She was Victor's child, and for the first time, Eleanor allowed herself to feel what that meant. Later that night, as she sat in her study, the past crashed in like a flood. Monica had only been 17, hired as a part-time cleaner for the guest house behind the Roberts estate. Quiet, respectful, always humming to herself, she moved through the rooms with the grace of someone trying not to be seen. Eleanor hadn't paid much attention to her, not until Victor started spending more and more time on the property during his rehab stints. Restless, irritable, and alone. The girl had soothed him somehow. They would sit in the garden, him reading poetry, her pretending not to listen. By the time Eleanor caught on, it was too late. One afternoon, she walked in on them, Monica in his lap, laughing, his arms around her waist. The slap Eleanor gave her rang through the marble halls. "How dare you bring shame into this house?" she had screamed. "You little snake, seducing my son in his weakest moment." Victor had tried to speak, had insisted it wasn't what she thought, that he loved her, that they were going to raise the baby together. But Eleanor had made her choice. She paid Monica off, threatened her, and banished her from the premises within the hour. And when Victor tried to leave with her, Eleanor cut him off entirely. No more trust fund, no more home. She forced his hand, believing she was protecting him, or perhaps protecting herself. He spiraled months later. The overdose wasn't immediate, but it was inevitable. And Eleanor had convinced herself it was Monica's fault. That girl had brought ruin into their lives. Now, years later, Eleanor stood in the cold hallway of the clinic, her heels clicking softly as she approached the small, dimly lit room where Monica lay. She had made no appointments, carried no entourage, just herself, and the weight of a history she could no longer ignore. Monica opened her eyes slowly, and when she saw her, her breath caught, her face hardened. "You've seen her," she said, her voice raspy but sharp. Eleanor nodded. "She came to my office. She was begging. And you sent her away, didn't you?" Monica pushed herself up weakly, her face twisting with fury. "After everything you did, you still found it in yourself to treat her like trash." "I didn't know," Eleanor said softly, and for once, it wasn't a performance. "I didn't know she was mine? His? Ours?" Monica scoffed. "Please! You knew I was pregnant. You paid me to disappear, and I did. I disappeared while your son died, and I raised our daughter in gutters you wouldn't even drive past." Eleanor's jaw clenched, the words slicing deeper than she expected. "I'm not here to fight," she whispered. "I want to help." Monica shook her head. "You don't get to help. You destroyed our lives. You don't get to fix it now." Tears prickled behind Eleanor's eyes, but she nodded. "If you change your mind—" "I won't," Monica snapped. "Go back to your marble tower, Eleanor. Let the poor die quietly, like you always preferred." Eleanor left in silence. No security, no driver, just her shadow and the crushing weight of guilt. A few days later, fate intervened again, less dramatic, more human. Eleanor was in a grocery store in Ikoyi, restocking her wine cellar before a fundraiser. Near the canned goods aisle, she heard a familiar voice. "Excuse me, Auntie, do you know where the bread is?" She turned. Lila. The girl didn't recognize her, not in plain clothes. No makeup, her hair tied back simply. Eleanor blinked, trying to gather herself. Lila beamed, waiting. She had that same unshakable brightness, even with dark circles under her eyes. Eleanor guided her gently to the bread shelf. "Do you come here alone?" she asked cautiously. "My mummy's sick," Lila said simply. "She's in the hospital. I come buy small things she likes. I want her to get better soon." Eleanor nodded, throat tight. "My mommy is the best," Lila continued. "She says I'm strong like my daddy. I don't know him, but I think he's in heaven watching me. Maybe he's telling God to make my mommy okay." Eleanor's breath caught. "You miss him?" she asked. Lila shrugged. "Sometimes I feel him, like in my dreams. I think he'd like me." "I'm sure he would," Eleanor whispered, blinking fast. After they parted ways, Eleanor sat in her car, staring at nothing. Her eyes burned, her chest heavy. She didn't cry loudly, not the way Monica might have, not the way Victor had when he was high and hopeless. She simply wept in silence, the tears rolling down like rain on glass. Every choice, every cruel word, every moment she believed she was protecting her family had led here, to a child she had abandoned, to a mother she had broken, to a ghost of a son who could no longer forgive her. And yet, somehow, Lila had looked at her with hope. She didn't know it yet, but that hope was the only thing still holding Eleanor together. Monica's breathing grew ragged again, just weeks after the first signs of recovery. Her chest ached with every movement, and the nights brought a terrible fever that no medicine could break. Lila sat at her bedside, clutching a wet cloth and whispering prayers only children know how to pray. The doctors ran new scans. The news came hard, a complication, a growing infection, and this time, the surgery couldn't wait. Without immediate intervention, Monica wouldn't survive the week, but the cost, double what she owed before, was impossible. Monica, too proud to ask, too afraid to be indebted, refused Eleanor's help again when she quietly offered. "We'll figure it out," she whispered to Lila that night, her voice barely audible. But even Lila, young as she was, could see the fear behind her mother's eyes. Eleanor couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe with the thought of that child crying beside a coffin. She made the decision in the stillness of early dawn. No signatures, no announcements, just a wire transfer to the hospital with strict anonymity. The surgery was scheduled the same day. Monica, too weak to argue, was rolled into the theatre, never knowing whose hand had opened the door. The operation saved her life, but secrets rarely stay hidden. Days later, as Monica recovered in the clinic, a nurse accidentally mentioned the anonymous sponsor, the woman with the driver and dark glasses. Rage washed over Monica like fire. She hadn't agreed to this. She hadn't wanted charity. When she was strong enough to stand, she asked Eleanor to meet her, not at the hospital, but in the courtyard of the flat, under the swaying fronds of an old palm tree. "You went behind my back!" Monica snapped, fury cracking through her throat. I told you I didn't want your money. I didn't want to owe you. You don't owe me, Eleanor replied, barely holding her composure. I couldn't let Lila lose her mother just because you're too proud to accept help. And you're still trying to buy absolution, Monica shot back. Like you can pay enough to rewrite the hell you put us through. I made a mistake. No, Monica cut her off. You destroyed him. She pulled a folded, time-worn letter from her pocket. Victor wrote this the night before he died. I've never shown it to anyone, not even Lila. Her hands shook as she opened it. She read aloud. If I die before I see her again, tell Monica I never stopped loving her. Tell my daughter, if she's born, that I wanted to be her father. I wanted to try, even if I was broken. Don't let my mother erase me from her life too. The words hit Eleanor like a blow to the chest. Her knees weakened. She reached for something to steady herself, but there was nothing. The realization came in layers, that Victor had loved Monica until his final breath, that he had wanted to be a father, that in trying to save him, she had buried him under her pride. Tears burst from her eyes, unrestrained and raw. I didn't know, she whispered, over and over, as if it might undo the years. Monica's voice softened, but stayed resolute. You didn't want to know. They stood there, years of pain and silence between them, until Eleanor finally broke through her own guilt. If you die, she started, her voice faltering, if you don't make it through this recovery, I want to take care of her. I want custody. Monica, eyes shining with heartbreak, looked away. I never wanted that. I wanted to raise her myself. But if it comes to that, if it's my time, promise me you won't twist her. Promise me you'll let her stay who she is. I will, Eleanor said, her voice shaking. I swear it. Monica nodded, tears streaming. Then we'll prepare the documents. But it's not a gift. It's trust, and you have to earn it. Later that week, Eleanor sat with Lila in the park, watching the girl chase bubbles with other children. The sun was warm, but Eleanor felt cold inside, afraid, uncertain, but determined. When Lila returned, cheeks flushed, Eleanor took her hand gently. There's something I need to tell you, she said. It's important. Lila tilted her head. I'm your grandmother, Lila. Silence fell between them, like a dropped plate. Lila blinked, confusion overtaking her bright face. But how? Mommy never said. I didn't deserve to be part of your life, Eleanor said carefully. I made mistakes, bad ones, but I've always wanted to protect you, even when I didn't know how. Lila looked away. Her small fingers tightened around her skirt. You were mean to me, the first time. You didn't want to help. I know, and I'm so sorry. Lila didn't respond. Her silence cut deeper than any words. After a moment, she stood and walked a few steps away, her back to Eleanor. Eleanor sat frozen. The child turned slightly, glancing over her shoulder. Her voice came quiet, fragile. I have to think about it. And she walked off slowly, uncertain, but not running. A child caught between the hope of love and the fear of betrayal. Eleanor watched her go, heart breaking open all over again. The truth was out. The damage couldn't be undone, but perhaps, with time and a child's fragile grace, it could still be healed. The surgery was long and uncertain, but Monica pulled through. Her body, worn thin by years of strain and silence, fought hard. In the days that followed, she lay in the narrow hospital bed, weak but awake, her breath steadier, the colour slowly returning to her cheeks. When she opened her eyes and saw Lila asleep in a chair by the window, curled like a cat in the sun, her heart ached, with love, with guilt, with something close to gratitude. Eleanor visited quietly, never forcing conversation, always standing a respectful distance away. When the doctor mentioned discharge and the impossibility of returning to the shack, Eleanor made an offer, a small, modest flat she owned in Surulere, private, safe, rent-free. Monica hesitated, pride swelling, but this time she swallowed it. On my terms, she said quietly. No charity, just a roof until I find my own feet. Eleanor nodded, agreed. The move was quiet and unceremonious, but to Lila it felt like magic. A real bed, a lock on the door, a place where rain didn't pour through the ceiling. Eleanor began visiting more often, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with books. Lila, curious and unafraid, asked endless questions. What was my daddy like? Why don't you smile more? Did you always wear high shoes like this? And slowly, something warm began to form between them. Eleanor took her to the library, then to the park. She taught Lila to read the newspaper headlines and write her name in cursive. The girls' laughter filled Eleanor's once silent home, softening corners that had long since gone cold. The housekeeper began leaving sweets on the counter, by mistake. The driver started playing old highlife music whenever Lila rode along. Weeks later, Eleanor brought Lila and Monica to a quiet cemetery in Ikoyi. The marble stone read, "Victor Roberts, beloved son, troubled soul, eternal light." Lila laid a flower gently at its base, while Monica stood stiff, hands clenched, eyes glassy. Eleanor didn't speak, only watched the wind ruffle the child's hair. As they stood in silence, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but an understanding that grief was no longer a burden they had to carry alone. In a quiet moment at Eleanor's home, with legal documents spread before them, Monica signed her name with a steady hand. Guardianship papers. If anything ever happened to her, Lila wouldn't be lost to the system. She'd have a home, an education, a future. Eleanor didn't ask for anything in return. She only whispered, "She's part of him. I won't fail her too." One evening, as the sun dipped low over the city, bathing the flat in soft gold, Monica and Eleanor sat on the small balcony, just the two of them, tea cooling in their cups, the air humming with things unsaid. Monica broke the silence first. "You were cruel to me," she said, her voice quiet but unwavering. "You didn't see me. You saw a threat, a scandal, but I was just a girl who loved your son." Eleanor stared out at the rooftops, her voice tight. "I know that now. I was afraid of losing control, of losing him. I thought I was protecting our name, but I failed you, and I failed him." They sat in the silence that followed, not with anger, but the shared ache of people who had survived something deeply human and deeply flawed. "Thank you," Monica said finally, eyes glistening. "Not for the money, not even for the flat, for giving my daughter a second chance." Eleanor looked at her then, not as the housemaid she once cast out, but as a mother, a survivor, a woman who had carried so much more than her share. "She saved me too," she said. "I didn't know how empty my life had become until she laughed in my kitchen." Healing wasn't instant. There were still old wounds, sharp memories, things too broken to mend, but now there was space, for grace, for apology, for something like family to take root in the cracks left by the past. Lila, in her innocence and hope, had become the bridge between two women bound by grief and pride, and in her smile, they both saw the future, messy, imperfect, but full of light. The afternoon sun filtered through the window of Eleanor's sitting room, casting soft light over the shelves lined with books and quiet memories. Lila walked in, her small hands clutching a folded piece of paper, her eyes dancing with excitement. "I made something for you," she said, pressing the drawing into Eleanor's palm. Eleanor unfolded it slowly. Crayons had sketched 3 figures, a tall woman in a blue dress, a smaller one with curly hair, and a tiny girl with a bright yellow smile. They stood hand in hand beneath a lopsided sun. Above them, in careful block letters, was written, "Me, Mommy, and Grandma." Eleanor stared at the drawing, her throat tightening. Her hands trembled slightly, tracing the lines. Lila looked up, proud. "That's you," she said, pointing. "Grandma, like in the stories. You're part of us now." And just like that, the words she had never dared to claim became real, not from paperwork, not from guilt, but from the heart of a child who had chosen her. Eleanor smiled, but the tears slipped down anyway, soft and silent, the kind she didn't hide anymore. She stood, walked to the mantel, and beside the photo of Victor, young, alive, full of promise, she placed the drawing in a silver frame. Side by side, father and daughter, past and present, held together by lines of crayon and the healing they'd sparked. As the camera pulls back, Lila humming to herself, Monica watching quietly from the doorway, Eleanor resting a hand on the child's shoulder, a voice soft and steady fills the silence. Sometimes redemption doesn't come in loud forgiveness. Sometimes it's found in quiet hands reaching back, fade to black.